Piece number 16, Awakening. Grandfather often remarked on the beginning of the day, especially when he was at sea far from shore. The morning began with a soft glow that eventually became light. A new day had begun. As with all of us, I feel the allure of nature whenever I take a walk in a park, a leisurely stroll in the mountains, or a hike beside a meandering stream. This is from my maternal grandparents. They were not seafarers, they were farmers, deeply tied to the land. There is something that pulls me, but I can't quite put my finger on it. I have been a city dweller for most of my adult life, so perhaps it is just a romantic ideal of how life should be. The desire for the unattainable which makes the want even more attractive. In that regard, I have no answers. I do recall my very first rural memories, however. My maternal grandparents came from Eastern Europe. They were part of the wave of immigrants that responded to the Interior Minister of Canada's advertising campaign at the end of the 19th and early 20th centuries. The ministry, led by Clifford Sifton, came up with a clever marketing plan that touched on the desire for land amongst the landless peasants of Europe. They called it the Last Best West, blending all three concepts together. To a farmer's thinking, this is my last chance to get to the West, to acquire excellent farmland. Brilliant. The promotion was used to market the Canadian West and, to some extent, Eastern Canada. It saw its apogee between 1896 and 1918, the end of the First World War. The scheme, as was the flavor of the time, was implicitly racist. The Northern and Western Europeans, Anglo-Saxons, were preferred. Fortunately for my family and for thousands of others, the quota was undersubscribed. The Eastern Europeans, pejoratively known as Ruthenians, had to be accepted, and to the settlers' great delight, Canada was also safe. The Canadian West protected by the Northwest Mounted Police, later renamed the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the RCMP. The American Wild West continued to be turbulent for a long time. The visceral fear of the Canadian government was that the American administration, with its manifest destiny ideals, would thrust itself into the potential breadbasket of the country. The Americans had finished the Mexican-American War. In its wake, Texas and large parts of the present-day United States had been added to its terrain. The British and Canadian troops stationed in Canada could not possibly stop an invasion. In the end, however, cooler heads prevailed. The multitudes came, and the administrators worked their magic. My grandparents got a piece of dirt, literally in the middle of nowhere. But it was theirs. The program was so successful that the Canadian provinces of Alberta and Saskatchewan were created in 1905. My grandparents' farm was like a Henry Parker painting and could have been magically extracted from Austro-Hungary or Poland and transplanted to the Canadian wilderness. I later went to school in Poland, and many of the villages and domiciles looked exactly the same. Déjà vu, perhaps. The main house had no running water, just a well. The bathroom facilities were sequestered in a little hut outside the back of the main house, the so-called outhouse. My grandmother would awaken at 5 a.m., and after her morning prayers wash all the floors. One particular image is permanently seared into my memory, the day the pigs ran away. In the languid heat of a late August afternoon, the alarm was sounded. Some 200 pigs had absconded. Pigs, being clever creatures, had undoubtedly figured out where their little sentient voyage was going to end. Everyone was down the road in a mad dash search for these wayward animals. They represented a substantial financial investment and an extensive source of food. Don't think of a modern, asphalted highway. Imagine 2 tracks with tufts of grass in the middle. I recall the billowing dust created by our running. The entourage included my aunts, uncles, cousins, with a few neighbors thrown in. Great fun. The beasts were apprehended only a few kilometers away, not really the prison break I had expected. My grandparents lived a very natural life. This has a long and elegant legacy. From the great philosopher and naturalist Henry David Thoreau. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and to see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived.